I'm honored to have Elaine Rusinko joining us. Elaine is an associate professor emerita at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She's joining us to share stories of her mother, Nancy, as well as discuss her most recent book, Andy Warhol's Mother, The Woman Behind the Artist. I first met Elaine in April of 2025 as she gave a lecture at the New York City Public Library discussing her book. It's the story of the mother of a pop culture artist of grand proportions. This life of a small Carpatho-Russyn woman who became known as Andy Warhol's mother began in Central Europe in a farming community in the late 19th century. Her birth name was Julia Zawadzki, once married. She and her husband immigrated to America, where most Rusyns worked in coal mines and steel mills of the Northeast. The Warhol family settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her youngest of three sons, Andy, became known for his pop culture art, yet it was Andy who claims he inherited his talent and love of creativity from his mother, who was not only an artist, she was a calligrapher, embroiderer, illustrator, and so much more. So much to talk about, Elaine. And it's great to see you. And it's been a long journey for you promoting this book, but the reviews are wonderful and people are embracing it for so many reasons. And that's why I'm happy to have you here to talk about your mom. And then we'll start talking about Julia because there's quite a story there. Welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother. What year was your mom born?
1915.
1915. So Julia was born in, was it 1891, I think?
That's right.
So there's not too much of an age difference. But your mom was born in the U.S. or
she was born in the U.S., yes, and her parents were immigrants. So she had a jump on Julia in terms of becoming Americanized. Julia in 1891 was born to immigrants in what is now northeastern Slovakia, and came to the United States in 1921. She didn't speak English at the time. My mother grew up speaking both languages, Russian and English, so she had that advantage.
Now, I want to go back to that picture, which is pretty poignant. It's the first photo, I believe, in your book, Andy Warhol's Mother, of the cemetery, the grave site where Julia's stone is an Andy stone. And then just to the left, what will people see when they read the book?
This was a surprise to me. The first time I went to Andy Warhol's grave in the cemetery outside of Pittsburgh, I looked up the grassy slope and I was looking for his grave and was shocked to see just in front of it a grave that had in big letters my own surname, Rusin. And I was not expecting that to be right next to Warhol. And after I looked at it for a while, I don't know these Rusinkos, but Rusinko is a common Rusin name. Warhol's fairly common as well. So that's not the surprise, but the fact that they would have come together here to know that.
And you came together to do this book.
Didn't know it. I've always said that I like the idea that Rusinko is next to Warhol and Rusin eternity. There's something interesting about how it came together. And it is part of how I got interested in the topic and how I followed it further.
So that's okay. So your mom, I want to concentrate on your mom because there are so similarities. They were just a few years apart. And when my listeners get to hear the stories more of Julia, they will be able to put things together. It was a hard time. It's a change at the turn of the century, and not many families had money. And that's why many families had a number of children, a large family, so they could help and contribute, whether you were on a farm or more urban area, more, not rural, urban area. So your mom, at a young age, had to leave the house and move to take a job to help support the family. What was her childhood like?
Um, it was hard. Her parents came to the United States around 1903 and immediately had a lot of children. Her father worked in the coal mines, um, and her mother took care of the kids, raised the kids. Um, she went to school, but only to eighth grade. And when she got to eighth grade, and she was not the oldest in her family, there were a couple of sisters ahead of her who had also gotten to eighth grade. And at that point, it was seen as advantage to send them to work rather than to school. And this was true of Rusyns pretty much everywhere, that they really didn't understand education. They didn't value education at that point. I mean, they were just trying to make their own living, and it was better to have the children out working. So at age 13, she went to New York and had a job in a house, in an apartment, as a housekeeper.
At
And
13 years old is eighth grade,
13
from what I
years old,
recall.
right?
That's
Yep.
pretty good. That's a lot.
And it was very hard. I know she didn't like to talk about that, and but I know it was very hard for her. And actually, when I was looking through censuses and that kind of thing, I found in one, I can't remember what year it was, where the family was listed, and she was listed with the family, but her occupation there was entitled servant. I know she didn't know about that, and I think she'd be very embarrassed if she knew that that was public now, that she was listed as a servant there. It just seems so demeaning. But I don't know, in other ways, I guess she learned a lot there. I don't know how long she worked there. Eventually, she moved back to Summit Hill, Coaldale, Pennsylvania, and was not able to go back to school. That was just not something that they did. She instead began working as a telephone operator, which was something that a lot of women did at the time, and immigrants. And that was the end of her education, really, at least formal education.
So say goodbye to your childhood at an early age, and you have to learn how to kind of be a survivor or contribute to surviving. And she was one of how many children, your mom?
Oh gosh, 6 or 7. I'd have to go back and count them all again.
That's okay. So how old was she when she got married? Was she in love with this said partner, or was it arranged?
Yeah. No. She fell in love with my father, who was a really good person, working in the coal mines. And actually, she had been living in New York for a while there with the people who were employing her. And she told me a story about how there was some guy that she met who was interested in her, and she was not quite as interested in him, I guess, and she knew about my father. Eventually, the two of them came together, and the New York guy said to her, "Well, he's a hick." And my mother attitude was, "Well, he needs me more." And they got together, and it was a great marriage for the rest of their lives. And it was not easy, because the life of a coal miner was not easy, and a coal miner's wife also not easy.
I can certainly understand it not being easy, because there was a lot that wasn't easy back then. But the similarities that they did have must have brought them quite a bit of comfort. So considering her past, what was she like as a mom? Was she conservative with her liberties that she gave you? Or was she very free and letting you do what you want? What was she like as a mom raising two children?
No, she was, both parents were rather strict. Um, they were older when we were born. I think my mother was 35, 36, which was old for that time. And uh, yeah, they set down rules. We didn't get a lot of presents or anything like that. We weren't spoiled at all. They kind of, well, I guess, they were raised by these immigrant parents, and that's what they knew about raising children. So they continued the techniques, practices, ideas that they grew up with. And for us, that was a little bit outdated, I guess you'd say. But looking back on it, it was good.
I completely understand that based on their past, they were trying to do the best they could with what they had.
Oh yeah, and they did. They did. I mean, we had nothing extra, nothing special, but they provided well. Um, my mother was, my mother sent us to a Catholic school, um, which was seen for her as a better school than the public, where we got a somewhat better education, I think. And so she was aware of these kinds of things to how to make things better, what she could do within her means to make things better for us.
Were you interested in pursuing education yourself, or were you motivated by your mom's experience saying, I'm going to go to college or I'm going to continue with higher education because I know it will give me a different future?
Not to become a college professor for sure. I wouldn't have even known what that was. But I was certainly motivated to do well. And from the very beginning, it was, I had no choice. You were always going to do well. And from first grade, I did. I don't know where that came from. I mean, I did homework and things like that, but I didn't have any extra help. Uh, and I did well all through school. Um, when it got to high school, we moved down to Maryland, to the DC area, because my father got a job in the post office, so he could give up the mining, and came down here. And that was a whole culture clash because it was like moving to a whole new world. Um, we weren't familiar with anything here. My parents then pretty old, and I don't know how they even did it. Uh, Picking up and coming down here where they didn't understand things. And I mean, they did not in terms of language, but just culture. That was high school, yeah. And then I was doing well. Of course, I was expected to go to college by people at school. I think my parents were. This is where we had a kind of a difficult um, communication because they didn't quite understand it at all. Their attitudes, you're still going to school. It was, they didn't understand anything about college really. But they did know that most kids went to college. And because I was in a school here now where everybody were in that class who would have gone to college, and I was always doing well. I was good at academics, and I went to college entirely on scholarships, of course. So I did that, and then even after college, I was recommended to go to grad school, and I did that, and that's what led me to become a college professor. And again, my parents would say, you're going to school again. Um, they couldn't quite understand it, but they did.
Yes.
But they did support me. Again, I did everything. They didn't have to put any money on it because I don't think they could have. But there were things that came up that, of course, they supported me on. And my first trip to Russia, I remember that they were happy to pay for that. Uh, and so that's what it was sort of unexpected path all the way through. And after grad school, then I did some work in Washington, and then went to my first job was in Iowa, teaching at Grinnell College. So it was just one thing after another that just sort of happened, luckily for me.
Yeah, considering your parents' experience, I totally get it. You were that next generation, that American, things were going to be bright and beautiful and wonderful, and they worked really hard to help you get that.
That's right. And it was, you know, a little difficult to explain to them what I was doing. So that was a little bit frustrating for on both sides, because they couldn't really appreciate what I was doing, and for me it was difficult to explain to them or try to make them understand why this was important and why I should be doing this. And so in the end, it all ended well.
It certainly did end well. Not that it's over, but the book is finished. Andy Warhol and his mom and Julia, the connections between Julia's family and your mom and her family back in Europe. It's a beautiful circle, whether it's serendipitous that you came upon this entire story, the connection, however it came about. I'm so happy you did, because I've so enjoyed reading this book. And now I want to talk about Julia and the similarities maybe of how your mom raised you based on her experience as a child, and Julia, because once the two older brothers, Andy's two older brothers, were married off, Julia really wanted to commit to spending time with Andy. She had been working with him, doing his calligraphy and in his movies, and helping him, encouraging him, and stimulating him, getting him interested in art. So if you could share some of those stories with us now, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do owe it to my mother that I got into this. I had started out teaching Russian, and I studied Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and so on. And then I got into studying Carpatho-Rusyn culture and literature because I had grown up learning something about it, not very much, but it was because of my mother's interest that pushed me in that direction. So it was just sort of natural somehow to follow Andy Warhol and his mother. Andy was very sickly as a child, and he was spent a lot of time in bed, as he would have these kind of illnesses annually or something like that. And she would stay with him, and there weren't the medications that we would have today, and it was up to that time. At that time, it was up to the mother to take care of the kid who was sick, and she played with him, and she watched movies with him, and had him draw pictures. Not only he, but his brothers as well, to have them draw pictures. So this was his first assistant, his first art assistant, his first art teacher. And to her, it just came natural because this all came out of the Carpatho-Rusyn culture. She had grown up doing all kinds of cultural things, making Easter eggs, painting the cottage and things like that. So she was very, very influential for Andy. But he did become, his brother said that he just acted like a little prince around the house, whether he could get what he wanted. But yeah, as he grew up, of course, he grew away from his mother. The homosexual thing happened. And that was, his mother didn't seem to understand any of that, but she knew he was different, but she encouraged it. He would be playing outside, playing softball with the kids, but he would come home to sit on the porch instead and draw pictures, and she just let him do that. She thought, that's him. She never had a problem with.
He's different. He's Andy.
That's right. Yeah. That was something that she continued to say through the rest of her life.
Very interesting. It's his life. What a simple philosophy. Yeah, absolutely. It was totally his life. His father had already passed, and then she wanted to be with Andy in New York. She was there for what, almost 20 years, I think, right?
Yeah, he died in 1942. So, and Andy was just 14 at the time. And it was a big, major catastrophe for him. It was something that he had uh, many years, and some say he never really grew out of it, the death of his father. And then after he died, and think also about Julia here. So now he dies, and she's in charge. And how does she manage? I can't even imagine it myself. Uh, the take over things like then it was Social Security, and she had to. He did. His father was very frugal, and kind of businesslike, and left money for Andy to go to college. And again, this surprises me a lot because nobody in that time went to college, and the Carpatho-Rusyns are almost no one, and no one valued it again. I don't know how his father would have even understood. Again, learning from my own experience that it's hard for that generation, for my parents' generation, not to mention Andy's father's generation, to understand what is college and what's it all about. But he put aside money for Andy, and and then he also during the Depression was able to buy a house. And before that, they were living in the slums of Pittsburgh. And in 1933, he was able to buy a house in a good neighborhood. And that also changed Andy's life. So I like following these things. And this is the kind of thing that really interests me. And I feel like I could understand a lot of it more than other people might, because I have gone through the same kinds of changes and the same kinds of experiences, and could appreciate what Andy went through and his parents. So Julia had to pick up and take care of things, and then a couple of years after her husband died, she was diagnosed with colon cancer, and she was put in the hospital. She had a colostomy. The kids were frightened because they just lost their father and now worried about their mother. But she came through, and the doctors had said that they even used her to encourage other patients who were going through the same operation, to encourage them to feel better, to handle it better. Uh, she was just that kind of, and that's a difference, I would say, between Andy's mother and my mother. She seemed to have been very optimistic about everything, and very just kind of had a upbeat kind of personality where she would take over things and handle it. My mother did too, but not in the same kind of way, not happily and not optimistically. I think she was more um, had a more down attitude. But Julia did well, took over, and was there. Let's see, this was, what did I say, 1942, 45, something like that. And then it was around 1949 when she moved down to New York with Andy. 1952, maybe.
When Julia was a young girl, because they were living on a farm and they had some land in Europe, I believe it was in your book that I read that she thought her dad hoped she would be another boy, which is understandable, but she wanted to prove herself. She was chopping wood and taking care of the animals and working out in the fields. But she was motivated. She was really motivated, wanted to get things done. She wanted to accomplish plenty and prove herself.
Yeah, she always did. Well, she in the old world, she was in charge. She took care of um, her parents, her mother's house, and then when she married, she had to move into, as they all did. She moved in with her husband's family and took care of that family. So she was really used to taking care and managing things. She was really good at that. And along the way, she did all these artistic, cultural things as well. The Easter eggs and the painting cottages and things like that. So she just this positive attitude that she seemed to have. Now, it's hard, we don't have a lot of information here. And in her later years, when she's old and ill, we see her being well, not very, but she's being difficult, not accepting her medicines, and she comes across as sad and pessimistic. But that's old age when she's almost 80, so I guess that's excusable. But
Yeah,
through
she
her
did an
whole
awful
life,
lot in those
that's
80
right.
something
Yeah,
years, right?
exactly. Yeah. And there's a wonderful picture that I had in the book that I'm not quite sure about, but there's a picture of Julia with her three American brothers, three brothers who came from the old country and were living in the United States, and one sister. There's one other sister who came to America who's not in the picture. But anyway, there's three brothers and one sister and Julia. And Julia stands there with her arms crossed. And I believe that this picture was taken, and can't be certain of this, but I believe it was taken probably at the funeral of her husband, because she's wearing the same dress as she was wearing in another photograph that can connect to the same timing. And if you just look at her there with her arms crossed and looking straight ahead with a really firm expression on her face, it gives me the idea of what she must have been like all her life.
Arms crossed, 2 feet on the ground. I can see it. There was a lot packed into that little body that she had. She was mighty, small but mighty. Elaine Rusinko has been my guest. She's the author of Andy Warhol's Mother, the woman behind the artist. And you can find Elaine's social media links on my website. The abbreviation for Should Have Listened to My Mother. So it's SHLTMM.simplecast.com. And Elaine, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.